Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game.
All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Real View Ohio Policy Talk. I'm your host, Anastasia, and I'm here today with my co-host, Andrew Huffman. Today, we're going to be diving into everyone's favorite topic, property taxes. This has been all the buzz across Ohio the past few years, and for good reason. So today, we're joined by a very special guest, State Representative David Thomas, who represents the 65th House District in Ashtabula and Trumbull counties, all the way up in northeast part of the state. So he's in his first term at the Ohio House and serves as vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And that's the committee that every property tax reform bill has gone through this year. Although he's in his first year at the House, he is not new to public service. He spent years working in local government. So we at Ohio Realtors have been very deep in the property tax conversation all year, and Representative Thomas has been right there with us. In fact, he sponsored all 4 of the reform bills that passed out of the Statehouse a few weeks ago, and we'll be talking about that here shortly. So with that, Representative Thomas, welcome to the show. We are so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for asking, and thanks for all that you guys have done. I always tell people, you all, the chamber, and several other groups have been behind us 110% with the reform efforts. So definitely appreciate it.
And you have been the champion. So, and like I mentioned, you served your community in several roles before becoming a state representative. Can you talk a bit about your previous roles in public service? And from those, what experiences made property tax reform such a priority for you and kind of pushed you to lead this effort at the State House?
Yeah. So I was one of those nerdy kids back in high school that just kind of loved politics, and actually got involved when I was 16 on my zoning board in my small township of Austinburg. It's about 3,500 people up here in Ashtabula County. So started way back then in 2011 when I was 16. And then just kind of from there, got a little more involved, was a township fiscal officer for 3 years for Austinburg after college, and then served as county auditor for Ashtabula from 2019 until my election and leaving the county level, coming up to the state here back in January. This is property taxes. It's the only issue I really ran on. It's my background, what I've spent the last 6 years plus kind of working on. And at the end of the day, just kind of said, hey, we're all complaining about it. We as auditors kind of know different ideas and ways to help, but no one's really stepping up. And so just said, I'll do it. It's been a great 11 months, 12 months now of just trying to do as much as we can, as fast as we can, knowing that, we have a lot of catching up to do. But really those experiences, local level, kind of seeing this process firsthand. And then really, just like realtors do, I, have a really good relationship with my realtors in Ashtabula and Trumbull. And I always tell folks that, you all are kind of the first contact, the boots on the ground in terms of answering questions, hearing from people. So the same that many realtors are hearing across the state, exactly what I heard as auditor, and what kind of propelled me to say somebody's got to do something. So I did something, went to the legislature, and thankfully, our members have been hearing these issues. Members were very open to really a lot of big changes, and it's been a good year of reform.
Well, Representative, this is Andrew. One thing that I have found throughout this process is a newfound respect for what our county auditors do and their roles in property taxes. It's just the amount of work that those folks do is just amazing. And if we can, before we start talking about what was passed by the legislature, can we take a step back and how did we get to this point? Because we heard the same complaints that you were hearing as an elected official. We heard that home ownership was becoming unaffordable because of property taxes. What was the core problem? What led to the situation that we found ourselves in? Because it didn't happen overnight. This was years in the making, correct?
Yeah, ironically, over 200 years in the making. Property taxes were our original form of taxation in Ohio. It's the longest running form of taxation in the state. And so naturally, it just gets more and more complex. The current crisis, really over the last 5 years, the explosion happened due to the unvoted increase side. That's where valuation spiked after COVID, and a portion of folks' bills that are tied to values directly went up by the same amount. There's voted increases and there's unvoted increases. The voted increases have been growing. I always would show taxpayers when they came into the office their tax bill and their breakout of levies and just add up how many levies over the last 10 years they as voters had approved and actually directly increased their tax bills. So those have been increasing over the years. Our over reliance at the local level, because remember, property taxes all stay local, local reliance on the property tax side, voters approving that property tax and just growing and growing. But the current crisis, why everyone's so upset, especially over the last 5 years, is that unvoted side, the pieces of our tax bills that have spiked, not with a vote or with approval, but purely because the real estate market itself has gone up. Now, this speaks to the complexity of the issue. There are so many different pieces with that. One could say, well, we should be tackling then the value side. And how do you tackle the value side? Well, you try to help the market, supply and demand. As realtors know, that's much easier said than done. We also have in the tax policy side as well, the pieces of the tax bill that are tied directly to value, but really shouldn't be. I always tell people, just because your value went up doesn't mean that your tax bill should be going up by the same amount or even a portion of the same amount either. And that's really where we dialed in, where the unvoted increases side and all the different reforms we passed this year, had they been passed 5 years ago, prior to COVID, we would not be talking, because I'd still be auditor, enjoying my local government life and having fun at the local level, because the crisis wouldn't have happened. But a bare root of it, it is essentially valuation spiked, tax policy didn't keep up with what's currently happening in the market, and then people's unvoted property tax bills went up much faster than what anyone was comfortable paying.
And that's really helpful. And the system is so complicated, like you said, and most people only really interact with it once or twice a year when they get their bill. And so, to your point, when these automatic tax spikes happen, people don't understand why their taxes went up if they didn't go and necessarily vote for them. So that's really helpful.
Yep.
And it sounds like we know that this year the Statehouse really had an appetite to address this. I mean, we had probably over 24 bills that we saw introduced just to address property taxes alone. But like I said earlier, a few weeks ago, we had 4 property tax reforms that were passed out of the Statehouse, and we were really excited to see that, all of which you were a primary sponsor of. Can you just kind of walk us through these 4 bills and what homeowners can expect to see in the next few years?
Yes. And actually, I'll do 2 more real quick before those 4. First thing, we did a lot in the budget. Most of it bluntly was vetoed. Some of it was not, and some of it we were able to actually override with the override veto over the summer. What was in the budget that is law now is essentially much more transparent ballot language, taking away those replacement levies, the substitute levies, emergency levies, having actual financial data from schools on the ballots moving forward, and also allowing for, at the local level, extra credits given to homeowners through the owner occupancy credit and to seniors through a homestead side. So that was all done prior in the budget. Fast forward, then House Bill 124 was actually passed 2 weeks before these 4 reform bills were passed. That's with Representative Thomas Hall and myself to essentially flip the script to say, at the local level, values are known, data is known much better. And that's really where the evaluation side should be starting, as opposed to in Columbus with the Department of Taxation. So that bill passed as well. Has not, as of today, when we're talking, been signed by the governor yet, but we're hopeful. Now, fast forward to the 4 major bills that were passed by both chambers with bipartisan majorities, and currently, as of today, sitting on the governor's desk. We'll go ahead and start an order. At a 30,000 foot level, what these 4 bills essentially say are that the unvoted spikes that occurred over the last 5 years will not happen again. For the first time ever, the legislature has actually capped and tamped down and given credits back from the unvoted increase out of the last 5 years, and then moving forward as well. So starting kind of number-wise, House Bill 129, this deals with something called the 20 mil floor, which is a minimum guaranteed tax rate that all schools can receive across the state. When schools' tax rates fall to 20 mils or 2% of the value, they essentially hold. They no longer fall. As values increase, that tax rate stays the same. Much higher values, same tax rate, you have a spiked property tax bill. Our goal with House Bill 129 was actually to remove as many schools off of that minimum guaranteed tax rate to prevent spikes in those districts moving forward. We count all different levies that folks have voted on for schools towards that 20 mil floor, what's the impact to homeowners? That removes 237 schools off of the 20 mil floor. And what that does is actually prevent voted spikes in 237 school districts across the state for the next revaluation. So that one's big. Moving up, House Bill 186. This also deals with the 20 mil floor, and it caps that unvoted revenue that goes to schools when values go up to inflation. This one is big because the 20 mil floor is really one of the tax policy sides that I talked about earlier with unvoted increases that drove a lot of those spikes in property tax bills. Instead of having a 30 or a 35 or a 40% increase to your local school that's unvoted purely because of value increases, you'll have a cap of that to inflation. So much, much lower. That bill also, we actually start in the second half of next year. This is very important for folks to know that their second half bills in the majority of homes across the state will actually see a credit for the difference of what you are currently paying with the spike, capped now at inflation moving forward. That difference will actually be shown second half tax bills of next year. Moving forward, you'll see that your savings, and it'll grow every revaluation. So people's tax bills will actually decrease starting second half of next year. That number is quite large. It's about a $2.7 billion savings over the next 3 years. And we are keeping schools whole until their next revaluation by actually taking money that the state has gotten in excess of inflation, capping ourselves, and then backfilling essentially. So that was an important piece of that bill. That's House Bill 186. Had that bill alone passed 5 years ago, the current crisis really would not be where we are today. Moving up, House Bill 309. This one deals with the Budget Commission, which is a local level entity of your county auditor, your county treasurer, and your county prosecutor. And this is really supposed to be that taxpayer check where they're asking questions of the local entity. They are looking at budgets and trying to do what government should do, which is keep tax rates and revenue as low as possible to fit what the voters actually want for their services. Budget commissions exist now. They really have no teeth. They have no ability to essentially lower tax rates in any means. This bill gives them the teeth, gives them the black and white authority to do so. The last bill is House Bill 335. This bill caps unvoted increases to entities that aren't just schools. So this is your county, your city, your village, your township, and your schools. Something called inside millage, which is a base level of unvoted taxes that I kind of tell folks, imagine there's no levies. We've never voted on levies. There's still a base level of property taxation across the state. That's 10 mils or 1% of the value tax rate. That goes to all those different entities, like I said, townships, villages, cities, counties, and schools. That's another reason why property tax bills spiked over the last 5 years. That tax rate was still 10 mils or 1%, much higher property value, much higher than tax bill. We cap that moving forward as well to inflation. So essentially every property in the state will be impacted by these 4 bills, either through limits on future increases, actual credits showing up on second half bills of next year, local fiscal financial authorities being able to review, to limit, to have oversight, and schools essentially having frankly a harder time at getting unvoted windfalls because of higher property taxes. So those are those 4 bills, plus we did in the budget, plus House Bill 124 in a quick nutshell.
Representative, that was a great summary, and I've tried to give a similar summary, and it's nowhere as thorough as that. So thank you for explaining that.
There's a lot there.
Well,
There's a lot there.
But you're right. When we started as realtors, when we started this process, we wanted to create reforms that, as you said, increase transparency and really give voters a say when they want their property taxes to increase to fund things like our schools and libraries. And I think the reforms that you implemented accomplished both of those goals. And so we can't thank you enough for your work. One thing that we noticed that was added to 186, and this was more done on the Senate side and not the House side, but the phase out of the 10% non-business rollback, that has gained some attention. I know there's a number of housing providers who own rental units who will no longer receive that 10% rollback, and they're concerned about the impact that'll have on renters. But can you explain that change that was made and how it potentially will benefit homeowners and why the legislature chose to move that direction?
Yes. So there is 3 basic credits that most Ohioans are able to get. There is the owner occupancy credit. That is a 2.5% savings off of levies that existed prior to 2013. And that is able to be qualified for if you own your home and live in it. So essentially, if you, Bob Buckeye, own your home, you live in it, you are saving 2.5% off the levies that are on your tax bill that existed prior to 2013. That cost is borne by state, and state taxpayers essentially backfill or pay for that credit to the tune of about $500 million. There's also the homestead senior citizens over 65 income threshold. That cost as well is roughly $500 million. And then there's the non-business credit. This credit is a 10% savings on the levies that existed on the tax bills prior to 2013. And a non-business credit is a 10% savings that goes towards any non-commercial property. What that means in the state of Ohio is a lot of properties. That's vacant land, that's homeowners, homes that are owned and owner occupied. That's also agriculture property, farmland, and Airbnbs, second homes, and rental units. That costs the state taxpayer for the non-business credit is roughly $1 billion. So in total, state taxpayers are actually subsidizing taxes at the local level already of $2 billion. And what we've noticed, and it's seen in certain areas especially, I'm sure your realtors will know kind of what I'm speaking of, that part of the reason we've seen much higher property values over the last 5 years and a big movement more towards rentals versus home ownership has been a lot of these corporate-owned properties, corporate-owned ventures coming into Ohio or being here, buying up homes, and there really being kind of a shift in that homeowner market across the state. Certain areas don't see this at all. Other areas, this is becoming a huge, huge problem. One of the ironies of that is that you and I are actually subsidizing those folks to the tune of 10% of their tax bill. And there's just really a fundamental issue with that. So that's one reason we were taking a look at this non-business credit. Who should it actually go to? And one of the purposes of these reforms, we're looking at homeowners, those that own their home, live in it, are most at threat really of kind of losing that American dream of home ownership. And so the Senate had actually put an amendment in that moves over the next 4 years. This is a 4-year phase-in, moves the owner-occupied credit up from 2.5% to 15.38%. So for homeowners, you're currently getting the owner-occupied credit, the non-business credit, you're currently saving about 12%. You're going to be now saving 15.38%. So the goal is actually to increase the homeowner credit, give money directly to those folks that own their home, live in it. How we're paying for that is essentially phasing out that non-business credit. So yes, renters who are currently being subsidized by taxpayers will have a 4-year phase out of that credit. Second homes, investment homes, those will no longer be able to get that non-business credit. We're moving about $400 million over to homeowners and helping those that own their home and live in it. Now, and I've talked with landlords, I've talked with mom and pop folks. I know that this is going to be a challenge for some across the state. What I've kind of reminded people, one of the biggest frustrations we hear from the folks, frankly, who are pushing to abolish all property taxes and people in general are that, there are people that are voting on levies but aren't really seeing the direct impact of their vote. And those are usually your renters. I always remind people, renters are paying property taxes, just not directly to the government, to the landlord, and then to the government. And one of the things this credit does is essentially it puts the full onus, puts the full kind of weight of the decision of the voters, and that's renters, on them. So that way they see much more of that impact and will have much more of that kind of in their mind when they're going to the ballot, that they're going to be paying the full amount as well, just like our homeowners. So those are some of the reasons we essentially made this shift, largely with the focus of helping the homeowner, helping the person that is most at risk, has the most invested with their property, and shifting it away from those who are either making money or having a commercial interest with their property. Essentially saying if taxpayers are helping to offset property taxes, where best is that money invested? And the answer, I think, in the legislature's mind is the homeowner. With this being a 4-year phase out, I remind landlords too that it's not going to be a sudden thing. Folks can see the credit amount on your property tax bill. You can see how much you're currently saving with non-business credit, and you're able then to say over the next 4 years, that amount will slowly decrease. And then you as homeowners will actually have that amount directly increase then over the next 4 years too. And this is a quick side note as well. If there are landlords out there listening, I always encourage people, show your tenants their tax bill. Show them directly how much they're paying towards their property tax, what their levies are, and help educate them before they go and vote for how much they're actually paying of their rent towards their property taxes. I think that'll be a big help.
Yeah, that's great advice. And we should stress again, all these reforms that you have described, in total, they're saving Ohioans over $3 billion over the next 3 years. So
And
we
growing.
can't lose sight of that. I mean, this is a massive tax reform effort that you led. It's the biggest tax overhaul that we've seen in a state in what, over 40 or 50 years, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Ohio actually led the nation in 1975, 1976 with property tax reforms. We've just blown holes through all of those protections over the last 50 years. And this year really does represent the biggest changes in taxpayer help in 50 years, half a century.
Well, and Representative, knowing you, your work is not done. I know, like Anastasia
Oh, no.
hit on it. There's still 30 or 40 tax related bills, property tax related bills pending. What do you see being the next steps? When you all return next year, when the legislature returns next year, what else do you think needs to get done in terms of property tax reform?
Yeah. So Chairman Bill Romer, he's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee from Summit County. He is an absolute rock star. He's been right alongside me, along with Representative Hoops for House Bill 186. Chairman Romer and I will be meeting here shortly, looking at the bills, essentially prioritizing, just like we did this year with the 5 big bills, what's happening next year then. There's a lot out there. I joke with folks, the property tax system is so big and complex, we have to get at it from all different angles. So just as examples, and I don't have the House bill numbers in front of me, we've got bills that I would like to prioritize for next year that makes the property valuation process for appeals much more taxpayer friendly, shift the onus actually a little bit more on the government to prove the valuation versus the taxpayer. That's one aspect. Shot clocks so that there's more certainty with tax bills and appeals through the State Department of Taxation and the Board of Tax Appeals is another great example as well. for those that are involved in farming, on the CAUV side, having a lot more uniformity across the state will help our farmers. And then part of that bill with Representative Peterson actually helps to give information much sooner to our farmers, which will help them prepare. Another bill with Representative Glassburn that makes the ballot language even better in terms of certainty for taxpayers to know exactly what's happening. And then it requires auditors to get that information out in terms of valuation changes, credits information directly to taxpayers much faster with a lot more detail. That way, voters and taxpayers have that information up front. Those are just the ones off the top of my head, plus others that other members have. Representative Daniels, for example, has a bill to add percentages onto tax bills. So that way people know in terms of percentage of their valuation, what does this actually cost me? There's other bills that require much more of transparency before levies actually get on the ballot. So we will have a lot more to do. We are 100% not done. I could spend all 8 years of my time in the legislature working on the property tax side and still have more work we need done. There's a lot to balance here. Obviously, property taxes are $24 billion worth of revenue. What does that revenue actually pay for? It's our schools, our fire departments, police, roads, parks, health departments, libraries, all those services that we enjoy, but there's a balance there when it comes to taxpayer protection too. So a lot more. Stay tuned. Next year should be a good year too.
Yeah, it sounds like you're going to have a very, very busy time at the Statehouse. And we're glad that you're doing it because you have so much expertise and experience and from hearing directly from your constituents and your previous work. So it's very encouraging to hear all of this. And I know it can be easy for people to think that once, a big property tax reform passes and that's a one and done deal, but like you said, there's a lot more work to be done. So we're really happy that you're here and that you can help champion that. But since realtors are on the ground every day, talking with homeowners, sellers, buyers, what message do you want them to carry back to their communities as we enter this next phase and this next era of property tax reform?
So, a handful of things. One, for realtors specifically, I always encourage them, know your county auditor, have a relationship with your county auditor, invite them to meetings, have them give updates. That was huge here in Ashtabula just to inform our taxpayers. You all are the first voice that a new homeowner is talking to before they actually make that big purchase and then have the tax bill. So the more knowledge that realtors can have on the tax side, answering those questions, I think that really helps both your clients and then our taxpayers. For realtors, what they can be telling homeowners now is that, their voice is being heard. We are listening. We are working, and to keep it up, keep sharing requests to the legislature, keep paying attention to what's happening in Columbus because it's working. We would not be able to have done the reforms we did without essentially a large push by our taxpayers and those that work with them. I'd also encourage realtors too, especially still in this market where you could have a current valuation of a home, new homeowner comes in, they buy it for much more, and just that little kind of tip ahead of time that, hey, there's a big difference here with the valuation. Your tax bill may change because you bought this home for much more, or there might be other changes or actual things wrong with the auditor's details that the homeowner may not know to actually inform the auditor of. So I think the realtor actually has a huge opportunity to be an advocate for the taxpayer. And I think the client of the realtors too will really appreciate that. And it's just a nice kind of customer service thing that we always kind of encouraged and had that relationship for here in Ashtabula. But base message to realtors, thank you for everything you do. You keep the real estate market moving. We are not done. There's much more that we have to do, but we could not have done what we did this year without you.
Well, thank you, Representative, and for all of those who are listening right now, as our team continues to work on property tax reform, and as these current four reforms become effective, we'll be sure to keep everyone posted and everyone updated on all the changes. I know there's so much to consider, and like you said, that communication with clients is super important, especially with all the information with the auditor. So thank you so much, Representative Thomas, for joining us today, for breaking down everything. You did such a good job of explaining everything. And I hope that everyone that's listening is finding this information super helpful, as Andrew and I are. So thank you so much for all your help and all your info today.
Yeah, no, and folks can always reach out. I've actually had a decent number of realtors that spoke at your all's Realtors the Rotunda earlier this year, and had some realtors reach out after that. So never hesitate to contact our office. Always happy to kind of walk through and help explain things.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll definitely include links in the show notes with all of the information we talked about today, and all the property tax legislation that has just passed. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. And I hope everyone has a really great holiday season.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.